Well, I'm really, really pleased to say welcome to the Freeman Report, Bernie.
Thank you for having me.
And Bernie, you'll know, I've been chasing you. God, it must be 2, 3 years now. And of course, you're a busy lady and a businesswoman, so you've always sort of been in the middle of deals and things like that. So we've never got to speak. So you've been a bit of an enigma, actually, over the past couple of years. So thank you for joining me today. Anyway,
You're
now.
welcome.
I guess the place to start, Bernie, is I've got a thank you to say to you. There's many of us who speak online, who do videos, who speak to the press, who post stuff all of the time. Um, so it's not for that, but I guess what I want to say thank you for is actually being a role model because you could have quite easily said after what happened to you recently when you were arrested, and that must have been really, really stressful. That whole thing is you could have just said, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm not getting paid any money for this. It's getting more and more risky. It could end up in jail time, and I think that's a reality now. Some people actually are in jail, aren't they? Um, so yeah, thank you very much for being a role model to other people because I think, look, if we all stick to our guns and just say no, we are not going to be we're not going to be silenced. We're not going to be told to shut up by the government about speaking about things which we have a perfect right to ask questions about of our government. If everybody does that, then there ain't enough jail places in the country to lock everyone up. So the whole thing just goes away, as standard. So thank you for that, Bernie. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I agree in part with what you're saying. And I was absolutely, you have to understand that I have been a bit of an enigma over maybe 2 or 3 years. And no, I haven't been available for interview because I was never the story. I was representing other people's businesses. And I don't believe you should mix your private hobbies or voice your private opinions when it could affect your business. So I tended to stay out of that kind of thing as much as possible. Um, I came out of a couple of businesses, things I was working on earlier on in the year, and was literally looking after my daughter, who's been incredibly unwell, when that whole debacle happened in July. And what I found about that, which was incredibly disturbing, and I never speak about my private life online, or I am quite a private person, she says. Anyway, I still am quite a private person, but it was within 5 minutes of those activists starting to attack me at 7 o'clock on that night when Channel 4 put my name and my face all over the place. My entire career, 30 years of good name, reputation, trustworthiness. You know what it's like in business.
Yeah.
People have to trust you, right? All gone, gone. And apart from the, I was, look, if I was arrested now, I would actually go down kicking and screaming, but I was so shocked at the loss of my personal reputation, which I knew would be absolutely devastating to my career. I knew that I had too much to deal with. My brain had too much to deal with. And when I got out of the police station after those dreadful 36 hours, the next 2 or 3 weeks, I was in almost a coma, and I had no devices, so I couldn't contact anyone. I had no idea what the support level was. All I could think was my life is over. That honestly, that's all I could think.
Hmm.
And then I got emails that were forwarded to me saying things like, never contact me again, take me out of your list. Like, what? People saying, could you remove our business name from anything you speak about in the future? And it was just soul destroying. So when you are at the bottom, when you look on Google and your life is considered a complete mess in front of your eyes. What do you do, James? What do you do? Because I'm faced
Mm.
with a choice, right? I either spend the rest of my life quietly, having been shut up by this government and the press and activists who just don't agree with the things I say. And when I die, right, in 200 years, when I finish downloading my brain on a computer, but when I die, the only thing people will find out about me is that day. And once, 3 or 4 months had passed, I thought, okay, well, I'm not scared anymore. I'm not scared. The worst that could have been done to me was done on that day. And so bring it on. If you want to take me back to prison now, I won't take a book. I'll take my knitting. Actually, they wouldn't let me have knitting needles, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think I know what you mean. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it's not obviously what's happened to you. I mean, when you said, your career's been devastated, is that is that actual materially happened?
Well,
How has
how would you get employed now? For somebody who looks after other people's businesses or starts their own businesses and raises money, where do you go to raise funds now? A private equity company, for example, will always do their homework. It doesn't matter what my CV says, they'll just do their homework, pull up Google, and what are they going to see, James?
Yeah.
Would you invest in me? Would you let me go and sit in front of a bank and raise 10, 20 million pounds for your business? Would
Well,
you?
I would,
But
but then
at the time, right? And of course, people will. But the road you're on, when you're suddenly veered off that road, it's a very big shock. It is a shock. And I think you're right. People will invest. I mean, if you look at what's happened in America with Trump, then it gives power to people who don't always follow a very left, very progressive dogma, right? So things will change, but
yeah.
it was I don't think people really understand how much you give up for your free speech, for your right to speak freely.
Yeah, and it's not just free speech, is it? Because you're doing a service, you're trying to warn people, you're trying to give them the information, and there's no gain for you, presumably, about
No,
that.
there's no gain.
You're not making any money.
No.
So to do that and still go through what you've gone and then come back fighting. I mean, that's what the thank you's about, because I just think it's so important to be that role model for other people. Because look, when all that happened and you were arrested across that period, I had so many emails from people who were thinking of just deleting their Twitter account because they were just frightened, and they hadn't said anything that
Yeah.
was illegal or anything, but they just didn't know anymore. It all became very ambiguous about what you can or what you
And
can't
what you can't
say.
say.
And so, having people like you, having other people that just stand up and say, no, I'm not going to be silenced, I think is really important. So thank you for that, Bernie.
You're welcome. Yeah, I don't think it's quite deserved, but you're welcome.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm not sort of thanking you for the actual the speaking in the first place. It's more the case of, you could have just decided, right, that's it, it's too much now. This is going to ruin my life, but you haven't done that because you know what's right and wrong. And
Yeah,
and like I said, it's really important that people understand that we've just got to stand up, and be brave and carry on doing what we know
I
is our
agree.
right to do. So yeah.
I agree. And you know what else I'm sick of? I'm sick of people talking about, I mentioned this to somebody yesterday. I'm sick of people talking about the silent majority. We are the silent majority. Well, that's what got us here in the first place. Stop being silent. Stand up. I
Yeah.
know the ordinary person is the majority. So just stand up.
You're absolutely right, because I'll tell you one thing, there's one issue which I think wouldn't even exist if people just spoke their mind, and that's the whole trans issue, and the debate around that, because I think most normal people do find it a bit bonkers that you've got men that are pretending to be women and then competing in women's sport, but they won't say anything because they've been told to be kind, and that, even though they think it's bonkers, and they'll agree with you in private that it's just all a bit nuts. Most people haven't got the courage because they don't want to be perceived by other people as being mean, even though actually to speak the truth is not meanness at all. How can it be mean if it's the truth? So yeah, it is a strange world that we live in, definitely at the moment.
It is a
Now,
very strange world. It is a very
but
strange world. And I think you're right. The lines have been blurred between reality and truth and feelings and what you want something to be or what you perceive something to be. In fact, I saw a headline for an article the other day that said something like, are we putting far too much reliance on the truth? It's like, what?
yeah.
You can't just live in fantasy land. And we brought our children up, didn't we? As you're probably the same kind of generation as me, but I remember when I was being brought up, no, I couldn't be in the netball team because I was crap, right? I wasn't even good enough to make orange juice for the team. And I couldn't pretend I was good. No one came along to me and said, let Bernie have a go. We're all winners. I just wasn't good enough. And then you started to have sports races at school where everyone was a winner. And then we started to tell children, you can be anything you want to be. Well, you can't, because the harsh reality of life is some people are born with a vast amount of brain power, and some people are born with vast amount of practical power. For example, it doesn't mean you can be anything. And I think we have to start being realistic again with children, being realistic with people about their lives, their finances, what they can achieve. So, for example, you get all of those influences, don't you? Young girls leaving school at 17, 18, and their entire life dream is to be an influencer. It's like, what? No, go and get a job. And if it's in a supermarket and you play around on that at night, do that. Hard work will help you get to where you want to go. Nothing comes easily. And I think that we've told a generation of children that they can be anything with little effort. And this is the result. Make believe is the result.
Yeah, and I think, we've seen a lot of tears, haven't we, online this week since the Trump win. Um, and that just goes to show, how I think out of touch and how
Yeah.
delusional some people have just been. Well, not just some people, a lot of people have become, because of the media, because of the way things have been warped, because of what they've been told by
Yeah.
governments about what is true and what is not
Yeah.
true. So we're in this kind of inverted world, aren't we, where Trump is kind of saying, no, there are only two sexes, and there's a lot of people who think that he's evil for that, and that that I've seen videos of young women crying, literally in tears, because she thinks that this whole Trump movement is coming for all of friends that are presumably trans and whatnot. I mean,
Ridiculous.
it's just
It
it
is
is.
ludicrous. Hysterical. It is a form of mass hysteria amongst a very ideologically driven group. I'm still waiting to see what anybody's policies are, particularly. Are we going to have a policy? Mind you, though, it doesn't matter if you have policies, does it, anymore? Because we
No.
had loads of policies in the manifestos and they all went out the window. So, yeah, I think we're on a knife edge because in the UK, of course, we're tending to look far more like the Canadian COVID years than we are close to any kind of freedom. I mean, we don't have a Trump coming to rescue us, and I think it's going to be incredibly hard over the next 4 years, and actually much longer with the amount of money from our economy we are pumping into what I think is absolute fantasy, absolute fantasy. And I think that reality will set in amongst ideologues, whatever those ideologues are, from I can, you know, play women's sports, even though I'm 6'7" and I'm a bloke with a beard. Reality will set in when there is no money, there are no jobs, the welfare state is enormous, and other problems are bigger than that. I
Yeah,
think that will be the
exactly.
case.
And we will talk about the whole climate thing in a minute and net zero and all of that. But first, we've already mentioned his name a few times. I might as well start here. Trump. What do you think the significance is of his win, particularly for us here at Brits in the UK, but also for the world? What do you think the significance is of that win?
I think it's absolutely enormous. Um, and I'm going to forget all the ideological stuff and what he thinks on things like, I don't know, women's issues, or I don't care about any of that stuff. The second Trump begins to pump oil and frack and energy prices come down, people have more money in their pockets, they are happier. I think America will be a more buoyant place. Economies are about cheap energy. That is what they are
Yeah.
about. And at the end of the day, if he is able to do the things that a sovereign nation does, like decide who comes in and out of the country, lowers taxes, which is important, energy prices come down, it will then bring food prices down and people will feel better. And like I said to you a moment ago, all these supplementary little flowery issues that people are talking about that they think are so enormous in their lives just aren't. What's enormous in your life, if you're an average, ordinary person, is being able to fill your car up with petrol, gas in America, drive to work and pay your bills. That is just what it's about.
Yeah. And do you have a view on, because I'm torn on this and I haven't made my mind up yet whether actually Trump is just part of the pantomime, the part of the global elite, which and we're just being played again, or whether actually it is actually true that he is a disruptor, that he's not part of the club. I haven't made my mind up yet. I still think that him getting in is a good thing because regardless of whether the pivot is a planned pivot that's just there, another manipulation, or whether it's a real pivot away from something, regardless, it's a good pivot, I
I
think. But what are your thoughts?
I think Trump dips in and out depending on whether or not he thinks it's good for him, his businesses, or his country. That's what I think he does. And what I do think and look, he might decide that digital ID is bloody brilliant for America because he can control his borders better. He might decide that. Do I think that's part of a global push? No, I think he is a disruptor. And I think, there are organizations that do need shaking up. The UN wasn't built to do this. The UN was not built to have control over every facet of our lives or
Yeah,
to create policy over every facet of our lives. And he's going to shake that up, and that needs to happen. The same at the WHO. These people are unelected. And, I talk about it. I've said that in the West, in particular, we've lost our sense of democracy and it's become elitocracy. Yeah. So suddenly our governments have become little more than local councils, all following policies set by organizations that we did not vote for, but we fund. That's absolutely insane. And if Trump is going to come in and really disrupt that power base, I think that is a good thing. But he's only in for 4 years. And these organizations have been growing in strength and power, certainly in terms of practically, for the past 50 years. Now, obviously, a lot of organizations go back a lot longer than that in terms of banking and central bank. I know that. But let's just talk about those practical organizations that we see today and that are in the limelight. They've been doing this for 50 years. Trump's got
yeah,
4. And that is a tiny short amount of time. It was like when Boris came in, right? And then they obviously took him into a back room and said, no, you have to do as you're told because we've got all this on you. Um, but when Boris came in, I remember a speech from someone at the EU just saying, it's only 5 years, don't worry about it. And I think that's how they see it. Only 4 years, don't worry about it.
yeah. Well, let's just hope he does all of the things that he wants to do. Because I think if he does dismantle the deep state, then I think it will be the end actually of their global push at the moment. It doesn't mean they go away, but I
Yeah,
think it will do an awful
it'll
lot of
disrupt it.
damage. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think so.
definitely.
I think so. And the more they can call out what is happening, within things like the WHO, within the UN, within the the IPCC, the more those things are called out as not good for the American people, the more America will get behind it, the lower his energy prices go, the more money they have. It'll make it much harder for that deep state in the short term to get back into America. What we have to do in the UK is just stop crying over Brexit. The EU is an utter shambles. And we've got to deal with this terrible Labour Party that we have in at the moment. We have to deal with it. I think we're going to have the most appalling 4 years watching the Americans going, right, how'd you get a green card again?
Yeah. Oh,
How do
yeah,
you
yeah,
move to
yeah.
Texas?
I'm already thinking about potentially going there. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen yet, but I've already got my eyes on America at some point over the next year potentially. Just because I can't bear a thought of another 4 years, was more than 4 years of the Labour government just ruining the economy here, while America is clearly going to
Yeah,
take off.
yeah, it will
Um,
take off.
yeah.
It will take off.
So, Bernie, one of the other things that's happened since, so we've seen lots of things actually happening, the stock markets, we've got new all-time highs, but also cryptocurrency. And you did tell me just as we were sort of logging on when we were chatting that you haven't got any yourself. But what do you think of that whole industry, and particularly Bitcoin? Have you got a view on it?
Um, I do kind of have a view on it. And I know that now most of your audience is all sat there going, oh, we thought she was intelligent, right? And I do. I do have that conversation with myself because I remember sitting in a taxi in Taiwan probably about 6 years ago and saying to my business partner, shall we just buy 10 grand's worth of Bitcoin? And her saying to me, no, let's go and have a wine. And we didn't. And I just feel like such an idiot. I feel like an idiot. And I've watched it and I've thought, you know what, you probably should dabble. Um, I'm keener on silver and gold and a little bit more what I can touch, right? I know that makes me a Luddite. You can all email me later shouting at me, right? Yeah, and I wish I'd had a go. It's a bit high now, though. I'll have to think about it.
Well, yeah, but look, I think there's so many examples of people saying, "Well, I've missed the boat now; it's too high," and there's lots of videos, when it got to $600, when it got to $10,000, when it got to 20, it's currently at 90. Well, it's actually 92. It's touched today. There's no doubt in my mind, unless something happens like a black swan event or something catastrophic, that Bitcoin is definitely going to $1 million at least. So you're not.
Hey, I'm gonna buy some. Don't distract me with a glass of wine. I will never forgive her for that. If I'd bought 10,000, just £10,000 of Bitcoin 6 years ago, what would it be worth today?
Oh, I mean, it'd be hundreds. I mean, I'd have to look at the price
I'm
because
gonna
it's quite
message
volatile.
her.
But
I'm
but
gonna
listen, if it
message
makes
her.
you feel better, Bernie, going back to about 2010, 2011, I had 300 Bitcoin because at
Right.
the time, you could buy certain things that you can smoke on the dark web with it. So can you believe 300? I mean, I'd be
Wow.
a tens and tens of millions if I just hung on to that. But
It's
you
so
know,
regretful.
yes, definitely. I have mulled over that many times. Benny, free speech. Obviously, that is what we stand for. That's that's what you got arrested for curtailment of free speech. Now, the Guardian newspaper has come out today. I don't know whether you've seen this story, but they're leaving X because apparently Elon Musk is, it's a toxic environment on X, and also Elon Musk has helped Trump win. What do you make of that? What do you make of the legacy media and it's a kind of approach to social media now?
It's just so incredibly childish. Just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean they're bad people or they're in the wrong. And I think before Elon bought X, when it was Twitter, it was a very manipulated place. So, you were constantly shadow banned if you criticized the narrative. If you didn't play the game, you were always in trouble. And the left thought that they were the dominant voice. When you actually look now at what's happened with X, the thing they don't like is that it's probably 48-52, right? There's so many more people than they thought that had something to say that didn't agree with them, and they just can't cope. So they just have a tantrum and walk off. And if the Guardian wants to have a tantrum and walk off, don't forget, it's totally on its arse anyway. If it wants to say goodbye to that revenue and increase its funding from Bill Gates, then it's up to it. It's a private entity. Do what you like, but they will lose a huge amount of readership and income from X. Up to them.
It does seem crazy, doesn't it? That because it's not the only organization that's walking away, and you just think, well, um, there's so many people on X, and it is now, I believe, the world's number one
Yeah,
platform for
yeah,
news, for
yeah.
spreading news. So for a news organization that's
I
part of the
guess. Do
legacy,
you know what? Do you know what? Do you know what? They probably have more information internally than we do. And that's that we know that the online harms bill, the EU new regulations about regulating online platforms, we can see what's happening in Australia with the need to actually have digital ID to access social media. I think there will be a squeeze. And I guess what the mainstream media is thinking and hoping and being briefed by governments about is that, don't worry, this is a short-term thing. It'll all have to go back to legacy media. We will have protected platforms. You'll be big again one day. I think that possibly is the case. And I think that is quite scary. The problem that the mainstream media have got, and that the government, whatever government it is, have got, is that the damage done to their reputations through loss of trust through the COVID years and as we've come out of it and subsequently is so enormous. I'm not sure that they'll be able to get that trust back. With X being the number one news source, if you close X down, I think people are more likely to go and buy CB radios than they are, take their news from a newspaper again. I think the loss of trust is almost absolute in those publications. And it's actually quite sad because The Guardian does have some good opinion pieces. I like reading other people's opinions that aren't the same as mine. They help you to learn. You get a grasp of where someone else might be coming from. And their tantrum is literally just a childish tantrum. If you believe in what you say and in what you have to offer, then bloody stand up and fight your position. And that's what the Guardian should have done. I like that
Yeah.
that's what the Telegraph is doing. I don't often agree with everything the Telegraph says, but it just put its great big arms around Alison Pearson and said, no, we're not having that. And I think that's what the newspaper should have done. They should have stood up to the government, and they should be standing up against those large organizations that the public didn't vote for. There was a time when the newspaper was on your side, and now they're not.
Yeah. Well, it's the fourth estate, isn't it? It's incredibly important to democracy, although I would say today far less so than it has been in the past because of this thing called new media. Now, obviously, Trump's got in, and we've seen lots of shenanigans, haven't we, with the European Union, with the Digital Services Act, and that was kind of looming over us along with the online safety bill. How significant do you think Trump's win is in terms of now change the narrative on that whole agenda that we knew was coming down on us? Do you think
I
this
don't.
this
I think they'll completely ignore him. I think they will dismiss Trump and try and band together as big bullies and isolate him. That's what I think the EU will do. That's what Australia will do. We will run along and tag along with them, and they will consider themselves a big bloc against Trump and this misinformation, disinformation, and now the most worrying, malinformation. So malinformation is what they describe as information which is true, but they consider harmful. Harmful, what does that mean? Well, it means if you're overcritical of the government or its policies or its agenda. And in order for these large entities, including the EU and the British government, to get any kind of narrative control back again over their respective countries. Now, we've just said they don't trust the press or the BBC, and they're using too much social media. The only way to get control back is to push that malinformation as hard as possible. And I just think they'll isolate Trump.
But
What did they do? So China has this thing where technically VPNs are illegal. Well, they're not really, because you just get one when you're out there. But that type of, well, you can have a VPN, but you have to be verified to get one so that we can check what you're doing. All of that will come into play.
Right. But do you not think, I mean, JD Vance has already come out since the win and said, look, to NATO, if you along with the EU are going to try and close free speech, then you can go it alone. We're not interested.
Yeah.
You just think
I
they're
think
going to
they'll
ignore.
face it up. I honestly think they will face it up. It is so important to governments that they wrestle back control of information that I actually think that they would take him on and do that. Yeah.
Right. It's going to be interesting.
Mm.
It's much better than the prospect of a Harris government, I think, because I think,
Oh
God,
my God.
I mean, I didn't want to think about it before the election. So I mean, I remember going to sleep on election night and just not thinking about it. And I totally forgot about it and woke up in the morning and it was like walking on air that day. Not because like I'm a massive Trump supporter or anything, but it was just relief because I know
Yeah,
that, I take your point that this doesn't change everything for us in the UK, but it does move the dial and it does make it much more difficult, I believe,
agreed.
for the Labour government to do the worst it could have done over the next 4 years. Because look, we're going to have the leader of the biggest, most powerful country in the world basically saying the whole climate thing is a hoax. Um, that does make a difference.
I think, though, that the problem is that Starmer is incredibly arrogant and lacking in any kind of empathy. And what that means is that I honestly don't think he will be worried what Trump does at all. I think he is far more concerned about what the UN thinks of him and what the EU thinks of him and what the WHO think of him. I think that is where Starmer sees his allegiance. I don't think he likes Trump. I don't think he's particularly interested in America, full stop. And perhaps he underestimates how vastly important America actually is. I don't
Hmm.
know that, but perhaps he does underestimate. I don't think it's particularly helpful, and I never have actually. I don't think it's particularly helpful for billionaires, even the ones I like, to slag off someone else's government. Just don't. Elon is in America. We hate globalism, so don't be part of it. Britain voted for this, for what they've got. It's our fault, and we'll vote differently next time. But I don't think it's helpful for Elon to start giving instructions to Starmer, just like I don't think it's helpful for JD Vance to do the same thing. Concentrate on America, make it great again, and people in other countries will vote democratically for the same.
Yeah,
I think that's how it's got to work.
I think the sort of pushback from JD Vance and what Trump has said is because not because they want to protect all of us in Europe. It's more a case of, because if you look at what the EU was doing, they wrote, I
Yeah.
forget the name of the commissioner, Thierry, I forget his surname, but he was the information commissioner and he
Yeah.
wrote to Elon Musk, basically warning him about Trump and
Yeah.
about his platform. And so I think that was more of a shot
And
across the
so
bow
has
from
Australia. You see,
Yeah.
so has Australia because social media has no borders. Australia's policy says if you say something that is misinformation about Australia, even though you're in the States, we can have you because it comes under our law. Elon's like, I don't think so. And that's what they're arguing about. That's the core of that
Yes. Yes.
central argument. And it's complete lunacy. But like I said to you, these countries with these socialist, Marxist type governments in place will do everything they possibly can to control the information. Look at what Mao did in China. You
Yeah.
know, they will stop at nothing to control their information. And I honestly believe they think that together they can stop America. I don't think they can. And I think Trump will make decisions based on what's in it for him and what's in it for America.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, to sum up that this conversation on Trump, I mean, I do think that um it has changed the dial. And I already think in many ways that actually we're winning. You know, we've been kind of trying to measure things over the past 4 years. What's going on? Are we winning?
Yeah.
I think we are winning, Bernie, because I don't believe that the COVID debacle and the injections were supposed to wake everyone up. I don't believe that was
No,
supposed to happen, but
no,
it
I don't believe
has.
that. But it has, yeah.
Millions of people around the world
Mm,
now. I know there's a spectrum to how much people have woken up. For example, my next door neighbor, um, the best way I can describe her, she's absolutely lovely, but she's a normie. She's not, she doesn't know about the stuff and read about the stuff that we're
yeah,
aware of. But I've had a conversation with her across the fence, and she brought it up. And she was saying, God knows what was in them injections. I just don't know. I don't trust them anymore. And I was just, but it pricked my ears up because, and that's not the first person, sort of normal person that knows something's wrong. They don't exactly know what it is, and they don't know what's going on, but they know the government has done something, and they're not being told the truth. And I think
yeah.
there are, I don't know, maybe even billions of people that know something is up. So I think we are winning in that race to wake people up. Now, Bernie, I guess of all the topics you post on, probably net zero and climate change is probably one of the biggest topics that you talk about. What's your understanding of this whole sort of area and this push for net zero? What do you think it is really about?
Oh, James, we just don't have long enough. I think literally we don't have long enough. These plans have been in place for a very long time. And I think that the industry that was in its infancy probably never would have gotten off the ground unless it had had this huge push from the UN and the WEF, who, of course, helped to bring together that Paris Climate Accord. Now, whether our governments are all just stupid, which I'm willing to believe they are, particularly in the UK, we outsourced all our great people, didn't we? We just let it go to the EU and people went into private businesses. Whether it's that or whether it's, all countries are in such enormous debt, can we think of a different strand of an industry that could generate some more GDP growth? Maybe it's that. I don't know. But what I do know is that almost every investment that we are making in green energy is a total lie. I know that the costs involved are so enormous and the success rate of the projects they're putting in are so tiny that we will literally impoverish ourselves. When what we should be doing is adapting. If the climate is changing, climate's always changing, right? But let's say for whatever reason, that change is accelerating, then what we should be doing is celebrating industries that can adapt to that, not trying to stop that, because that would generate far more wealth. So, for example, if the temperature raises 1%, then in Britain, for example, we'd be able to grow far more food, far more vegetables, far more fruit. We'd be able to grow wines and all sorts of things. And that's just in the food sector. If it changes by 1% in Africa, and that 1% causes famine, why aren't we focusing on anti-famine strategies in those countries if they need help? What I don't understand, logically, practically, or economically, is trying to stop something we can have no control over. That's what I honestly believe. And I see where the money is being funneled to, and it actually hurts. It hurts. And that was one of the reasons I started making these videos. And it's one of the reasons I kind of began with a few of the net zero topics, because people hear the word carbon capture machine and like their ears close down because they think it's really boring. And apparently we're going to spend 22 billion on it, but the government must know what they're doing. Like your neighbor would think, oh, that's boring. The government must know what they're doing. Right. Well, they don't. There isn't a carbon capture machine anywhere in the world that has worked.
Apart from
anywhere.
trees.
Sorry?
Apart from trees.
Yeah. So you look, the oceans and it's not only trees, it's every blade of grass, every weed, all absorbs CO2. The oceans absorb 30% CO2. And these carbon capture machines, they emit more carbon than they capture. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pump it all under the sea. And when you pump, and the UK, by the way, wants to pump 30 million tons of CO2 a year in rocks. Well, they won't talk about fracking, but the risk of seismic activity from pumping that amount of carbon underground is far greater. Yet we could frack and have much, much cheaper energy. Nothing makes sense to me. Nothing. And that's why when you say, what's it all about? The subject is so enormous. It'll take 10 years to explain it all. But I really believe it's a generation of enormous, enormous profits from citizens. It's a tax. Everything is a tax. A solar farm doesn't actually ever generate a profit, ever.
Doesn't it?
No, they don't generate profits. They are, weather is too variable. And so over the course of a year, they are in a negative position. And the income stream they receive is simply from two different subsidies they receive from the government.
Right. Okay.
Well, why would you want to do that? To save the planet? I just honestly, James, it's so incredibly wrong. I can't even tell you how bad it is.
And Bernie, do you think that CO2 is actually, and not just because obviously there is a relationship between temperature and CO2. There's a lot of people who actually think it's the opposite way around. The earth warms and that releases the CO2. So I'm not clear on whether it's causation or correlation, but there's definitely a relationship. But what do you think about that? Do you think that these climate scientists have got it wrong? And there's a lot of scientists who say that they have, because of course they're the ones that get cancelled, the ones that speak out.
Yeah.
But do you think that CO2 is causing the earth to warm?
I've got absolutely no idea. I'm not a scientist. That is the truth of that matter. But if it is, and we have accelerated a warming position, then we should be looking at adaptation, not stopping it, right? Because I think mostly, I think it's a big ask that I believe that CO2 is the cause of global warming, right? It's 0.04% of our atmosphere. It's 0.04, of which humans, contribute 0.01%. right? So it's a big ask for me to get there. But I don't want people to think I'm sat here as a climate nutter, just like JFK doesn't want people to sit there saying he's a vaccine denier. He's not. He's saying, prove they're safe. I'm saying, prove to me that what we're doing has any measure of sense whatsoever, because there's nothing I've seen anywhere in any scientific paper that makes any kind of economic sense that says this is the right thing to do. Nothing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, James, can you imagine? Can you imagine, right? Rare earth. It's called rare earth for a reason, right? Because there isn't much of it. Imagine 200 countries all trying to hit net zero by 2050. There will be wars over that earth. There will be wars over it because you can't do it without those elements on the periodic table. We need them. And for me, I just can't see how it can work. And the other thing is, right, you've started me now. The other thing is, we're putting all of this money into solar panels that we know don't work. Well, they work, but they don't make any money. We're putting all of this money into wind. We don't have the battery technology to store it, by the way. New video coming on that, everybody. And we never will have, to store enough energy for the US for one day would take Tesla, their battery factory, to ramp up production 500 times for 500 years. And they'd only have enough storage for one day. So none of it makes any sense. And we're an island surrounded by waves. No one's doing wave power. Yeah, because you can't make any money out of it. That's why we're not doing it.
Yeah, it is absolutely bonkers, isn't it? And particularly, I guess, Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer, they're at COP at the moment. And, we represent in the UK, I think it's less than 1% of emissions. This is if you buy into the whole CO2 thing, by the way. India, China, and the US, definitely under Trump, they're just going to crack on and their economies are going to thrive. So what are we actually doing? What are we actually doing?
We are outsourcing our pollution to China and India in the first place. Right? We're actually outsourcing it. And the big thing about Ed Miliband, this is how you know that your people in government have never worked in any kind of business, right? Ed Miliband keeps saying, we're going to lead the world. We're going to be first. Right? I've been in business for 30 years. And every single business I've looked after, I've told people, don't be first to market. You be best to market, even if you're second. Because you watch what someone else does, you see it's a complete cock-up, and you do it differently. So what Ed Miliband should be doing is looking around the world at carbon capture machines and going, oh yeah, they're rubbish, aren't they? They don't work. And what are we doing about the seismic activity? Probably we'll wait till you've done it, Canada. I'll have a look. And then if you like it, we'll have a go. But no, he wants us. He wants us to be the guinea pigs first. Utterly deranged.
Yeah, absolutely agree 100%, Bernie. Final topic. I want to get your view on farming. This is another hot one at the moment. Obviously, we've just seen, it's not like farmers haven't got enough to worry about, and it's not hard enough for them already. But obviously, this removal of the inheritance tax relief. What are your thoughts on that and the whole farming issue at the moment in the UK?
I'm just desperately sorry for them because it's taken a long time, really, for Britain to realise that the new Green Deal in the EU is being scooped up over here. And, the inheritance tax is an incredibly personal punishment, really, to lots and lots of small farms. And farms are still small when they've got, 200 acres. That's still small. They've only got 100 cows.
Yeah.
They're probably making 30 grand a year. That doesn't make them rich or wealthy. But the pressure on farmers, if you look at the bigger picture, is that lots of those smaller, just breaking even, just losing money every year, will do one of two things. They will either sell completely and they'll be bought by either larger operations who are consolidating large amounts of land, like supermarkets, talk about that in a minute, or they will rent out their land for guaranteed income over the next 10, 20 years by putting in solar power, for example. But they won't want to leave it to their children. So it's more likely that as they get to the end of their working lives, they will sell those farms. Now, in the UK, we've got really, really used to fantastic supermarkets, but in Europe, they do wonderful, wonderful markets. And there's a very good supply chain route locally from local farm to local market. We don't have that in the UK because we want very cheap food. We wanted very cheap food. We used economies of scale so that transportation costs came down. Supermarkets were huge sheds. It was cheaper to stock, all of that kind of stuff. And of course, when you have no competition and you just got 4 or 5 supermarkets and they talk to each other on prices anyway, and you've only got about 10 brands on shelves, all owned by big corporate, overriding companies, then prices are pretty much fixed. And the problem the farmers will have is that the farmers will sell their farms to people like supermarkets. Morrison's owns fantastic farms, or they'll sell them to other big farming conglomerates. And the British public will massively lose out, not only with food security, but prices will increase and your quality of food will come down because, of course, when you've got huge, vast farms, you can do lots of geoengineering and things because you're on such large amounts of land. And the small farmer in the UK will die out. And that's desperately sad because we're losing part of our heritage and our history. And it's incredibly sad. Do I think there will be food shortages? Well, here's the thing. Most farmers have contracts with supermarkets, right? They just do. And if they don't supply under the terms of those contracts, they will be financially penalized. And lots of farms won't be able to cope with that. So I think they will have to continue their deliveries to supermarkets or they'll go bankrupt. I don't think there'll be shortages in supermarkets because if those farmers then say we're on strike, we're not delivering you our cabbages, then Sainsbury's will just pick up their supplier in France and buy it from there.
Yeah.
Blockading works, blockading of ports work. I can see that happening more than I can see them financially being able to not supply.
Yeah. Are you going to go to the protest next Tuesday in London?
No, I don't think. I live in Chester. And if it's possible for me to get there, I might do so. We'll see. I think there's some local ones around here which I would definitely be attending.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. And if you're watching this, obviously, what I'm talking about is the protest on the 19th, Tuesday, the 19th of November in London. It's going to be an interesting one. There's a lot of anger. I think it's important, obviously, at this stage that there isn't trouble, that it's peaceful. But I really do think it could bring London to a standstill. So I think it's going to be a really interesting one next Tuesday. Now, Bernie, just finally, if this is true, tell us about this. I think you've launched it. It seems, I became aware of it in the last few days, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's your thoughts with this? Is this something? Have you got a long-term vision for this? What are you doing?
I don't know yet, is the truth. I needed to expand on. I think it's often difficult, isn't it? Probably why I got into trouble in the first place, to say things quite quickly on X, and you're unable to follow it up with a vast amount of information. And I thought, look, I do have a lot to say on a number of subjects, and I think I can make them interesting. So I'll do it. And that's the plan, really, is so I've picked on topics that I know my followers on X are interested in, things like the WEF, not all the crazy stuff, but what is the history? How deep is their relationship with governments? Where is that coming from? Why is that happening? Things like, I didn't know that they had a religious peer. I didn't know that that religious pillar had pulled together all religious faiths 5 years ago to follow a socially progressive narrative. I didn't know that. So putting out information, I believe the next fight we'll have won't really be about free speech. It'll more be about free information. So people ask me, are you a free speech absolutist? And I always say, am I? I kind of am, but you can't have free speech without free information. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? And I believe that there will be a huge quashing of information. So one of the videos I put on TikTok yesterday, I don't use TikTok, right? I am rubbish. I've got loads of followers, don't even know how to use it, completely useless. But one of the videos I put on was that WEF one. It's a historical piece. There's no misinformation in it. It's all verifiable facts. And it's violated TikTok's rules and they've taken it off.
That doesn't surprise me. I had 6 or 7 strikes, and every time I would appeal against it, and then they would put the video back up. But of course, it's lost the momentum. But
Yeah.
in the end, on the 7th one, they just cancelled me, and there's no right of appeal or anything else. And so I set up an account in a different name, and they've obviously got AI now.
Yeah.
So the AI realized it was me, and I've done that twice now. So I've just given up. I've given up. It's
But that's quashing of real information.
yeah.
And I think that is very wrong. So that's why I set this up. And they're just short, maybe 15, 20-minute type videos covering subjects that people just might not have enough information on. That's all I've done.
And a request from me, Bernie, because I love the thing I love about your posts is that they are very, very insightful because everybody who's kind of aware what's going on is just sharing stuff. But
Yeah.
you always go that extra mile and you dig into the figures and you'll expose the craziness about it. One thing I'd love to see, because I think we do need more people, is talking about solutions. What do we do? Because, it's all very well kind of saying to people, this is really bad. Look at what they're doing. It's really bad. And it's bad because of X, Y, and Z. And isn't it crazy? But I think we need people like yourself who clearly you're very clever. You've got a business mind on you. You're good with figures, good at understanding economics. Is what do we do? What do we do
We vote
apart
them
from
out.
just pull our hair out? What do we
We
do?
vote them out. We vote them out. Someone will come along, right? Now, it could be reform. I think, do I think it will be Nigel? I have absolutely no idea. I have absolutely no idea. But this can't go on for long. I just don't believe it will, because if it continues and if we get poorer, and if we start actually getting intermittent energy, or what's probably more likely to happen is prices will go up at peak time, so poor people will be cold. At those types of points, it really will break the government and the media will turn on the government. And then we have to vote differently. We have to be clever. The danger, of course, is that Labour decide to change the rules to proportional representation and we get a government that is Liberal, Green and
Oh,
Labour.
God.
But, sometimes things have to get as bad as it could possibly get before it gets better. And I, like I said to you at the beginning of this, stop being part of the silent majority. Right? Stop being silent. Write to your MPs. I know it's old-fashioned, right? But that is our democracy, right? Tell them how you feel. You will never vote for these people again. And if they get enough of this, then they will put pressure on their own government and the opposition will know what we want. Look, there's nothing to choose between the Conservatives and Labour. Both of them are busted flushes for me. But something will have to change. I just think it will get much worse before it does.
Yeah, I agree with you there. That's so if I do go to the States, I think it'll only be for a few years and then come back to the UK when it's all sorted. Hopefully, by 2029. Listen, Bernie, thank you so much for joining
You're
me today. I'm
welcome.
absolutely thrilled that you've launched your own channel now. Like I said, you have been kind of a bit of an enigma because your posts are very, very popular, and obviously, you're on your account on X is pretty big now, but this must be your is it your second or third or
Yeah, I think it's my third. I think it's my third. Look, the big account I lost in the January, I think could have been my fault. But because you can't get hold of anyone at X, I can't get it back.
yeah.
Basically, I deactivated it for a year. But it won't let me back into it. And it says the account doesn't exist. So I don't know if I've forgotten my password or if I changed its name one time too often, but I'm still paying for it. So Elon, if you're watching, please could you find my account? But yeah, this
Brilliant.
one's up to nearly 70 now. So
Yeah.
they found me.
And and growing quickly. Bernie, thank you so much for joining me on the Freeman
You're
Report.
welcome,
Thank you.
James. Thank you for having me.